It started with a scream so sharp it cut through the cold air inside San Quentin State Prison, bouncing off the old stone walls like the building itself was shouting back. Metal doors slammed. Boots rushed. Radios crackled. In the dim hallway of North Block, one of the most dangerous units inside the prison, an alarm blared so loudly it made the floor shake. And right there, right in the middle of the chaos, lay an inmate everyone thought was untouchable. Marcus Iron Leroy. His hands were shaking. His eyes were wide. And carved into the concrete beside him were the words, "The walls never forget." Nobody knew who wrote it. Nobody knew how it got there. And nobody knew what Iron had seen only seconds before he collapsed. All anyone knew was one thing. Something had just happened inside San Quentin, something that would change everything. But to understand how the prison reached its breaking point, and why Iron Leroy, the toughest man in North Block, was suddenly terrified, we have to go back. Back to the first day a new inmate entered the prison. Back to the moment this whole chain reaction quietly began. 3 months earlier, on a foggy Monday morning, a prison bus rolled through the gates of San Quentin. Inside sat Devin Miles, a 26-year-old who had never spent a day in a maximum security prison before. He tried to look calm, but the shaking in his hands gave him away. A guard looked at him and said, "Welcome to San Quentin. Last chance to be scared." Devin didn't answer. He just swallowed hard as the bus doors opened. The first thing he noticed was a sound. Not yelling, not fighting, just this never-ending echo, like hundreds of voices whispering all at once. He thought it was just his imagination. But it wasn't. The inmates lined up in the yard watched him closely. Some smirked. Some ignored him. But one pair of eyes watched him like a hawk. Marcus Iron Leroy, the same man who months later will be found shaking beside that strange message on the wall. Iron was a leader in North Block. People stayed out of his way because that was a safe thing to do. But today, his eyes were locked on Devin. Devin didn't know why. Nobody did. Not yet. Devin was given his cell on the 3rd tier. Old metal bars. Scratched concrete floor. A tiny window that barely showed the sky. That first night, just as he tried to sleep, he heard something. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, slow, like someone knocking on a wall. He sat up. It came again. Tap, tap, tap. He got off the bunk and pressed his ear to the concrete. But the tapping didn't sound like it was coming from a person. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall. Devin stepped back, confused. He tried to tell himself it was pipes or maybe rats. But then he heard a whisper, a low, shaky voice saying just one word, "Run." Devin froze. Before he could react, a shadow passed his cell window. Heavy steps approached. It was Iron Leroy. Iron stopped, looked into Devin's cell, and said, "Whatever you think you heard, forget it, before it remembers you." Devin stared at him, confused and scared. Iron walked away, but the tapping didn't. It kept going, slow, steady, patient. And then, bang! A loud explosion echoed from the far end of the tier. Guard shouted. Inmates ducked. Smoke rolled through the hallway. Someone had blown open a cell door. The smoke was thick. Alarm screamed across the tier. Guards rushed toward the blown-open cell door while inmates pressed themselves against the walls, coughing and shouting. Devin covered his mouth with his shirt. His heart was pounding so fast it felt like it might burst. All he could think was, who would blow open a cell, and why now? As the smoke cleared, everyone finally saw the open doorway. And that was when the fear spread. Because the cell that had been blown open didn't belong to a violent gang member, didn't belong to a troublemaker. It belonged to Old Man Carter, the quietest, calmest man in the whole block, a man who barely spoke, a man who kept to himself, a man who everyone believed was harmless. He was gone, just gone, not a trace of him. Only a small black symbol was burned into the concrete floor of his cell, a circle with 3 lines cutting through it. Devin had never seen it before, but Iron Leroy had. Iron's face went pale. He stepped back slowly, whispering to himself, "No, not again." Before Devin could ask what he meant, guards ordered everyone back into their cells. But Iron didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at that symbol like it was a ghost. Later that night, the prison went into lockdown. Lights stayed on. Doors stayed locked. No movement. No yard. No talking. But even with the alarms off, Devin could still hear the tapping. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it spread through the whole tier, moving from wall to wall like something crawling inside the concrete. He pressed his ear to the wall again. Tap, tap. Then a whisper. Carter wasn't the first. Devin jumped back, breath shaking. He looked out through the bars. Ian Leroy was doing the same thing, pressed against his own wall, listening. Ian noticed Devin watching. "You shouldn't hear it this early," Ian said softly. "Hear what?" Devin asked. Ian hesitated, then whispered. "The walls. They keep score." The next morning, the lockdown was lifted. Inmates moved in small groups to breakfast while guards watched closely. Devin sat alone at a metal table. Ian walked over and sat across from him. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just said, "You're mixed up in something you don't understand." Devin frowned. "I don't even know what's happening." Ian leaned closer. "Years ago, before you ever got here, men started disappearing inside San Quentin. Not transferred. Not released. Just gone." Devin swallowed. "You think that's what happened to Carter?" Ian nodded. "And every time someone disappeared, that same symbol showed up. The circle with lines?" Devin asked. Ian's eyes darkened. "That's the one." Devin shook his head. "But who's doing this? A gang." Ian hesitated again. "That's the part nobody wants to talk about." Before he could say more, a guard shouted, "Leroy, Miles, let's go. Counts aren't gonna do themselves." Ian stood up, but before walking away, he said, "Stay away from the walls. Devin, they remember faces." Later that afternoon, Devin returned to his cell. He expected quiet, but instead, his stomach dropped, because right there on his cell bed, right where his pillow should have been, was that same symbol. The circle, the 3 lines, burned into the mattress. Devin's heart raced. Someone had come into his locked cell. Someone had left a message. He looked around desperately, trying to see if something else had changed. Then he noticed it. On the wall, scratched so lightly you could barely see it. One word. Next. Devin stumbled back, terrified, and at that exact moment, bang! A loud crash shook the tier. Metal bent. Inmates screamed. A body dropped from the upper walkway, landing right in front of Devin's cell. Blood everywhere. The whole block froze. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a fall. Someone, or something, had thrown him. For a long moment, nobody moved. The block was silent, so silent that Devin could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. The body that had dropped from the 3rd tier lay motionless on the floor. Guards rushed in, shouting orders, pushing inmates back inside their cells. Devin gripped the bars, shaking. It didn't look like the man had slipped. It didn't look like he had jumped. It looked like someone had pushed him. Ian Leroy appeared on the walkway above, scanning the area with sharp, worried eyes. When he saw Devin looking up at him, he mouthed, "Stay inside." Devin backed away from the bars. He didn't know if Ian was warning him, or if Ian was scared himself. But either way, Devin had the sinking feeling that whatever had taken Carter, and whatever had written next in his cell, wasn't finished. Hours later, when the block quieted, the guards made an announcement. The inmate who fell has been identified as Ramon Vega. Devin recognized the name. Vega was a small, quiet guy from H Unit, known for fixing radios and reading old books. He wasn't part of any gang. He wasn't violent. He kept to himself. Just like old man Carter. Devin whispered to himself, "Why them? Why people who don't bother anyone?" A voice answered from the next cell over. "Because they listen." Devin turned. It was Jackson, the older inmate who mostly stayed silent during lockdowns. Jackson didn't look at Devin when he spoke. "You heard it too, didn't you? The tapping, the whispering." Devin hesitated, then nodded. Jackson sighed. "People think danger in San Quentin comes from fights, gangs, or guards. But sometimes it comes from places nobody looks at. What does that even mean? Devin asked. Jackson pointed to the wall between their cells. Some of us hear things. Some of us try to ignore it. But Carter and Vega, they were paying attention. Devin's chest tightened. What happens if you pay attention? Jackson looked at him. Serious. You get chosen. Later that night, the guard did surprise head counts. Doors clanged open and shut. Flashlights swept through the block. But Devin noticed something strange. Ian Leroy wasn't in his cell. Normally Ian never left during checks. He followed rules because it kept him powerful and protected. But tonight, he was gone. Devin heard footsteps on the tier above. Soft, careful. So he quietly stepped to his door and peeked out. He saw Ian meeting with two other inmates in the shadows of the walkway. Devin recognized one of them, Reese, a man known for smuggling. The other was Dawson, a huge inmate who almost never talked. Ian kept his voice low, but Devin could still hear pieces of the conversation. Vega wasn't supposed to be next. We're losing control. They're moving too fast. We have to find the source. Reese whispered, What about the kid? Miles. Devin froze. Ian paused, then said, He heard it. I saw the look in his eyes. It's already started for him. Devin's stomach dropped. Started what? Before he could hear more, the guard's footsteps returned. Ian and the others scattered back to their cells like nothing had happened. Devin stepped away from his door, heart racing. Whatever Ian was hiding, whatever source they were searching for, Devin was now a part of it. Around midnight, the prison finally went quiet. Devin tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Then, tap, tap, tap. He sat up immediately. The sound was stronger now. Closer, not from the pipes, not from another cell, but from inside his own wall. Tap, tap. He slowly reached out and touched the cold concrete. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then the whisper returned. Low, hoarse, urgent. You were not supposed to see the mark. Devin stumbled back. I didn't ask for any of this, he whispered. The voice replied, You were chosen anyway. Suddenly, scrap, the wall behind his bunk made a long, dragging sound, as if something inside it was moving. Devin's heart pounded. He pressed himself against the opposite wall, staring as a faint shape pushed against the concrete, forming a human-like outline from the inside. He couldn't breathe. And then, boom, a deafening explosion shook the entire block. Lights flickered. Dust rained from the ceiling. Inmates screamed awake. An alarm blared through the speakers. All units. Riot in the yard. Riot in the yard. Guards sprinted past Devin's cell. Ian Leroy shouted from across the tier, Devin, don't go near the walls, no matter what you hear. But it was too late, because the shadow inside Devin's wall was still moving. The sirens outside shook the whole building. Inmates shouted from every tier. Metal doors rattled. Guards yelled for everyone to stay inside. But Devin couldn't look away from his wall. The shadow pressed harder against the concrete, like a person was trapped inside, trying to push through. For a moment, the shape grew clearer. A shoulder, an arm, a hand stretching outward. Devin backed up until he hit the door. No, this can't be real, he whispered. Then the shape suddenly froze, as if it sensed something, and slowly it faded back inside the wall, leaving the concrete cold and still again. Before Devin could breathe, Ian Leroy appeared at his bars. Listen to me, Ian said. Whatever you just saw, whatever you think you heard, do not talk about it. Not to guards, not to inmates, nobody. Devin swallowed hard. You knew this was going to happen to me. Ian didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the bars and whispered, Riot's a distraction. Whoever's behind those symbols, they move during chaos. We don't have much time. Time for what? Devin asked. Ian looked down the tier, making sure no one was listening. To keep you alive. From outside, Devin heard the chaos growing louder. The lights in the block flickered as a noise from the yard carried in. Shouting, metal clashing, the thud of boots and bodies moving. Guards rushed past with shields. Orders echoed through radios. Inmates breaching lower gate. 2 officers down, none fatal. Requesting backup, now. Devin gripped the bars, trying to see through the windows across the tier. He saw smoke. He saw inmates throwing objects. He saw officers pushing back. But what he didn't see was a reason for the riot. And neither did anyone else. Because rumors were already spreading through the block. This ain't a normal riot. Someone started it on purpose. They are covering something up. Devin felt his stomach twist. Everything was connected. The symbol in Carter's cell, Vega's fall, the whispering wolves, Iron's secret meeting, and now a riot. Sudden, perfectly timed. Nothing about this was random. When the noise died down, Jackson, the older inmate in the cell beside Devin, leaned close to the bars. "You think the riot started out there," he said quietly. Devin toned. "What do you mean?" Jackson nodded toward the concrete wall. "Where do you think the first sound came from? You ever notice how the tapping got louder right before the sirens?" Devin froze, because he had noticed. Jackson continued. "There are people who think this prison has secrets. But the truth is," he glanced around, then whispered, "this place has survivors." Devin frowned. "Survivors of what?" Jackson didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just said, "Of whatever lives in those walls." Before Devin could ask anything else, a loud siren cut him off. "Lockdown! All 'tis, full lockdown." As the lockdown began, guards marched down the tier, slamming heavy doors shut. But when they reached Iron Leroy's cell, he wasn't inside. A guard shouted, "Where's he?" Keychains rattled. Flashlights scanned the walkway, but Iron had vanished. Devin grabbed his bars and whispered, "No way, he was right here." Jackson spoke softly. "If Iron's missing during a lockdown, it means he's chasing something. Or someone." Devin felt panic rising in his chest. What does he think he's going to find? Jackson looked at him with tired eyes. The truth behind the symbol. Just then, a power surge blacked out the entire block. Lights snapped off. The tier dropped into pitch darkness. Inmates screamed. Guards panicked. Footsteps echoed from somewhere far down the hallway. Devin felt something cold brush the back of his neck. A breath. A whisper. "Next!" Before he could react. Crash! A massive metal door somewhere below them slammed open with brute force. A door that should have required 2 guards and a special key. A door that wasn't supposed to open at all. The block shook. Lights flickered faintly. And then they heard it. Not tapping. Not voices. But a deep, dragging sound. Coming from the lower level of the prison. Something, or someone, was climbing up toward the tiers. The dragging sound grew louder. Slow, heavy, steady. Devin stood frozen in the dark, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone in the block could hear it. Iron Leroy's voice echoed from somewhere down the tier. "Stay away from the wolves. Don't touch them." But Devin couldn't move. His eyes were locked on the lower level where the huge forbidden door had burst open. The darkness behind it seemed alive. Then, a tall, thin shape stepped into the faint emergency light. Not a ghost. Not a monster. A man. Old. Pale. Thin like someone who hadn't seen daylight in years. But Devin recognized him. "Carter," he whispered. Old man Carter stepped forward slowly, his feet dragging across the floor. His eyes were open, but he didn't blink. He didn't speak. He just pointed. Straight at Devin. Iron Leroy ran up the stairs fast, yelling, "Back up! Don't let him get near you." But Carter wasn't walking toward Devin. He was pointing to the wall behind him. The same wall that whispered. The same wall that moved. The same wall that chose people. Iron reached Devin's cell and grabbed him by the shoulder. "There's something you need to know," Iron said quickly. Carter didn't disappear. He was taken. "By who?" Devin whispered. Iron glanced at the wall. "Not who. What?" Devin stared at him. "You're telling me something is living inside the walls." Iron shook his head. "No. Something was put there." Devin felt chills crawl up his spine. Iron continued. "Years ago, the prison had secret rooms inside the walls. Experiment rooms. People used to say the walls listened because they were built with hidden shafts and tunnels. Devin swallowed, and Carter was trapped in there. Ian nodded. Carter found something down there, something he wasn't supposed to see. After that, the walls took him. Devin looked over the railing. Carter stood perfectly still, staring straight upward, right at him. And Vega? Devin whispered. He heard the walls too. Ian nodded again. Anyone who listens too close gets chosen. The lights flickered again. Carter lifted one arm slowly and touched the wall beside him. Immediately, tap, tap, tap. The entire tier responded, walls tapping everywhere. Not in chaos, but in rhythm, like the prison itself was speaking. Ian gripped Devin's arm tighter. You need to ignore it. Don't look. Don't respond. But Devin felt something pulling him, something wanting him to listen, to pay attention. The tapping grew louder. Then Carter spoke, his voice low and cracked. You heard us. You belong with us. Devin felt the walls vibrate behind him. Ian shouted, Devin, don't listen to him. Devin forced himself to turn away, breathing fast. No, Devin said. I'm not going anywhere. The tapping stopped. Everywhere. Total silence. Carter lowered his hand. Then he whispered, Then you're free. Hours later, the riot was controlled. The power came back on. Guards rushed through the block trying to regain order. But Carter was gone again, vanished into the lower levels as if he'd never been there. Ian sat beside Devin's cell, exhausted but relieved. You made the right choice, Ian muttered. Most people don't. Devin leaned against the cold bars. So it's over? He asked. Ian nodded. For you, yes. The walls won't call you again. Devin let out a breath he'd been holding all night. For the first time since arriving at San Quentin, he felt a strange calm. The walls were silent. No tapping. No whispering. No shadows. Just the normal hum of prison life returning. Jackson's voice came from the next cell. Consider yourself lucky. If the walls let you go, they won't ask twice. Devin nodded slowly. He didn't understand everything. He didn't know what the walls wanted, or why they chose some men and not others. But he understood one thing clearly. He survived, and inside a place like San Quentin, that alone was a victory. The sun began to rise outside the narrow cell windows, sending soft light through the bars. A new day, a quiet day, and the walls stayed silent. For now.